All in Sports Network. We love sports.
It is Friday, November 29th, and this is your daily fix for all things Texas Longhorns right here on All in Horns, brought to you by Rogue Sports Network. I'm Tanner Carlson. That is Jake Jimerson, and we have a jam-packed episode for you today. It is our 69th episode.
Nice.
And we are going to go through the history of Texas A&M, and why this game and our age group, Jake, 30, 40-year-old men, don't really consider this game as the highest notch of rivalry for Texas because, well, it's been a little one-sided. We're going to get into that. We're going to give our keys to victory as the Texas Longhorns go into College Station for the first time in 13 years, and then we will finish this thing out with final predictions, not only for the Texas A&M game, but really for the games across the country as well. So let's go ahead, get into it, and starting off with kind of the history of these two programs battling it out. For the first time in 13 years. This will be the first time in 18 years that McCoy is not the quarterback for the Texas Longhorns taking on Texas A&M. And so it'll be interesting, Jake. Looking forward to the game. But you and I, we were talking, I don't know, yesterday, a couple days ago, earlier in the week. I don't know when it was. Thanksgiving week has thrown me off completely. However, we kind of really only remember this game, at least for me, as watching it on Thanksgiving. That's kind of my biggest memory. And then the Justin Tucker kick. But in terms of like big moments, big time games, big environments, and big just like implications to the game in terms of moving forward in your season or season ending moments or just big plays or just these things that happen with Texas OU where I can just go down year after year of like big things and just like they stick in my mind. I don't really have that with Texas A&M aside for a moment here and a moment there. But nothing really sticks to me as like, I can't go back and say, oh man, that 2008 Texas A&M game. Wow. An instant classic. I just don't have those in my memory bank.
No. And when you look at the scores, it's a little bit obvious why. And when we were just talking about this, we didn't even have the history of the game in front of us. And then when I looked it up, it's like, oh, yeah, I forget. It really did used to just be of like a Texas is most likely going to win that game feeling. Yeah. And it wasn't like an A&M or like an OU game where it's like anything can happen because almost every single year was a blowout or at least 2 possessions or more. In fact, the only year since 2000 that hasn't been in a Texas win has not been at least a 2 possession victory is that final matchup.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's crazy to me that what is Texas? And Texas in the last, since 2000 to 2011, which was the last time these two teams played against each other. So since the year 2000, in that 11-year span, Texas is 8-3.
Or 9-3.
9-3.
Yeah, 9.
I beg your pardon. 9-3. The
9-3 and victories going down from 2000 down to 2011. Texas won in 2000, 43-17, won in 2001, 21-7, won in 02, 50-20, won 46-15 the next year, won 26-13 the next year, won 40-29 the next year, lost in 06, which was McCoy's freshman year, 12-7 at home. That was the game where a dirty shot knocked out McCoy for the game. They won the next year, 38-30, A&M did. Then it went back to Texas in 2008, 49-9, 2009, 49-39. Then they did lose in 2010, 24-17. I believe that was the first year after Colt McCoy.
Correct.
And then obviously that final game, they won 27-25. So you really just have a bunch of absolute ass kickings. And then the 1-2 point game. And then the 3 matchups that A&M won, which were all 1 possession games.
Yeah. And it just, so like, there's probably a reason why they don't have any, just like these like all-time great memories of this game being just an instant classic, because It just hasn't been. And that's not any fault of mine. But it is why, and it explains to hopefully Texas A&M fans who are tuning into this as well, that it feels like a secondary rivalry to Texas fans that are me and Jake's age. Hell, it really, back in the 80s, I think, was the last decade that A&M actually owned the rivalry. Am I wrong in thinking that?
The 90s was close. I'd have to go back and look again. The 90s was pretty close. It was almost split, I think. But the 80s is definitely the last one that A&M actually just dominated in. It's one of the few decades that they dominated in. And so I think 90% of Texas fans probably agree that OU is the primary rival. I don't think it would take multiple years of OU having seasons like they are this year and A&M having seasons like they are this year for that to change. Because we talk about this history, that doesn't matter for this game. A&M is probably a better team than in any of those years I just listed this year. So that doesn't matter for this year. It's just more of explaining the history behind the game and why, to the vast majority of Texas fans, A&M is little brother. A&M is a secondary rival at the end of the day, is because most of younger people to middle-aged people's lives of watching this rivalry, which watching one side beat up on the other consistently.
Yeah. And again, I do think that A&M is in a better spot as a program as a whole in the SEC over the last, I don't know, handful of years than they have been in the Big 12, kind of in the dog days of the Big 12. That's not to say that they've had any better success in a season. They still don't have 10-win seasons. They still haven't made it to a conference championship, which they didn't do in the Big 12. They're not doing in the SEC. So in terms of wins and losses, they're sitting at about the same. I will say, however, they're getting more recognition, and I would say playing better with they've got pro talent. They've put players in the draft. They've had years where they've put in, offensive linemen continually into the draft. Have they done anything with that talent? Not really. It hasn't really resulted in wins and losses since they've made it to the SEC championship game. But that's kind of an assessment of Texas A&M from a Longhorns perspective, really. I mean, and I think that's not even a Longhorn perspective. I think that's just kind of nationally known. I think LSU clowns on A&M. I think Alabama clowns on A&M. I think there's teams in the SEC that clown on A&M for that reason.
Yeah, and it is because the fan base is so loud. And Texas is like that too. Texas just has more recent success to fall back on that keeps getting further away. But now you have Texas starting to climb back up. And so that has obviously amplified the arrogance. But you have a equal level of arrogance from A&M to Texas fans, but no success in the modern century and really almost the last 100 years to back up that talk.
Yeah, Texas has had back-to-back 10-win seasons, Jake, with Sarkisian, and it's the fastest that a Texas head coach has achieved that goal, back-to-back 10-win seasons. A&M has done it 0 times.
Yeah, those stats are just until A&M is able to string, because this season's been great for A&M, especially when you consider it's Elko's first year. But it's going to feel pretty sour if you end up going 8-4. The funny thing is Texas could beat A&M and still end up having no ranked wins after this game. It's possible. I don't think they would drop out, but it is possible. Just kind of a funny fact from this. But I feel like if you're A&M, this year would feel pretty disappointing if you end up losing excuse me, three out of their last 4 games.
3 out of their last 4, and then that one win being against New Mexico State.
Well, and this is A&M fans, if you disagree with this, you can put it in the comments. This has got to be the biggest game in pretty much any of your lifetimes.
Yeah.
No matter what your age is, because you have a chance to go to a conference championship, a legit one, not one you just claimed that you didn't go to. And you have a chance to beat Texas in their first year back in the SEC and deny them a chance to get in a conference championship game. So I had to throw that out there because they do have Big 12 championship years.
Sentence that you said that you claim that you haven't been to is just it's comical.
It's true. Look at their stadium. They claim Big 12 championship years and years where a Big 12 championship was played and they were not involved or they lost it.
Yeah, right. I know. It is comical though. So anyway,
They're a
Jake, so
comical program.
they are the clowns of college football, and they will continue to get clowned as long as they keep acting that way. Let's go ahead, get into keys to victory for this Texas A&M game for the Texas Longhorns. The keys to victory, at least for me, Jake, is to one, keep A&M out of the red zone. We talked about it in previous episodes when we talked about, by the numbers. They are one of the better teams offensively that once they get into the red zone, they convert it into some sort of points, but mostly touchdowns. Their touchdown percentage and their rate is very good in the red zone. They're a top 5 team when it comes to doing that. And that has a lot to do with the legs of Marcel Reed and the power running backs that they have in Daniels. Le'Veon Moss is no longer there, but Daniels is a power back that can get across the goal line in a short yardage situation. So keep them out of the red zone. I think this game, for Texas's defense, they have to continue playing the way they've played against, mobile quarterbacks, whether that be Taylon Green, whether that be against, Pavia, and really kind of keep these guys in the pocket, or I was thinking of the Oklahoma
Hawkins
quarterback,
as well.
Hawkins. Yeah, Jackson Arnold's played the last couple of weeks, so I forgot who Hawkins was. But yes, so Texas, if they keep that same kind of game plan for Marcel Reed, I think it should end up in success. But even if A&M drives the ball down the field, give A&M an opportunity to drive it. Don't give them short fields. So anyway, going into my second, protecting Quinn at all costs is another key to victory. That defensive line for Texas A&M, very good, very stout. They can get to the quarterback. Nick Scorton is probably a key player that you're going to have to hone in on and watch out for. But it's not just him. It's him creating the havoc and the attention from the other offensive linemen in terms of help that allow the other guys to get the job done on that defensive line. A very good group from their front four. And so lastly, team tackling is going to be vital. I talked about it a little bit earlier with keeping them out of the red zone and making A&M drive the ball down the field. But if you team tackle and you avoid yards after the first yards after the carry, I guess you could say, and not yards after the catch, but that yak yardage after first contact, you've got to get their guys down on the field because they can break tackles. And if they're breaking tackles and they're getting 2, 3, 4 extra yards after that first contact is had, then they're set up to have success on the offensive side of the ball.
And for my 3 keys, my first one is win first down, and this is both sides of the ball. At this type of environment, which is probably going to be the most insane environment Texas has played at in a very long time. It's going to be crazier in the Big House than Alabama last year. It's going to be different.
They put in a speaker wall.
Yeah.
Did you see that?
Yeah, speaker gate, which I think they have to shut those off when you get to a certain point in the play clock. I don't know much about what's going on with that because to me, it's just a stupid distraction for the game.
Apparently it's for the band or something like that.
Yeah.
They gave some ridiculous excuse to have it on there.
So winning first down, because on the offensive side of the ball, Texas is obviously much better when they're ahead of the chains. And then for the defensive side, it allows you to pin your ears back. And that's when you can actually really try to get after Reed, is when you have some yardage to spare. You can have a spy and you don't mind a 4-yard scramble on a second down and 10, a second down and 12, and setting up a third mid to long. Right. Second, it's going to be control emotions. This is a game to get to the SEC title. It is the renewal of a rivalry that hasn't been around for 13 years. And there's going to be a lot of trash talk. The crowd is probably going to be saying a bunch of things, and you can't let that lead to penalties. You can't let that lead to mental errors. You have to go out and play Longhorn football and put the emotions to the side when it comes to making stupid plays. You can let that emotion fuel your play in between the whistles and being smart. And then last, and this is probably my biggest concern for A&M having an avenue to beating Texas is the field position battle.
Mhm.
A&M is one of the better special team units in the country. They have one of the best punters in the country. Texas is one of the worst teams in the country at net punting yards per punt. And that is probably the scariest aspect of this game is with A&M being so effective in the red zone, how long are they going to have to drive to even get to the red zone if Texas has a 3 and out or if they have a turnover? But, if the punting game is as bad as it's been all year, I don't see why it'd get better now. That could play a big factor in a game like this.
Well, and we saw it with Ohio State, Indiana, how much that turned the tide of that game where Indiana seemed like they actually had somewhat control in that first quarter. A couple of things go wrong on the special teams, a botched snap, a kick return, and then boom, all of a sudden, Ohio State has all the momentum in the world. Their crowd is feeling it. They're in the game, and they win the special teams game, and they win that game handedly. And so, but you're right. Even a guy like Silas Bolden, say he bobbles or muffs a punt, and A&M either gets it or gets a big hit, and it's the momentum switching from those special teams units that can really play a vital part in the success of one team or the other in this game.
And momentum swings in an environment like this for the
Right.
home team are going to be huge. When that crowd gets rolling, that's where the game is going to feel really tense. And so it's important for Texas to start out well, and that starts with, I think, first down success, and then also when things aren't going your way, because it's not going to go Texas's way from start to finish more than likely, that field position battle. You look at the Georgia game this year. That game was essentially lost on field position.
Yeah.
And so that's in Arkansas, every game this year I can think of, when Texas punts the ball, they never are pinning a team deep. That's what's so incredible about this defense's performance this year is they haven't really been put in good situations. Very rarely does a team have the ball inside of their 25-yard line.
Yeah. Yeah. No, you're exactly right. And the punting game for Texas has been poorish, not just in the return game, but also punting the ball to the opposing team as well. All right, Jake, let's go ahead, get into our final predictions for this Texas A&M game. Do you have any individual performances you'd like to try to call out or moments in the game?
I am very excited to watch Kelvin Banks against Nick Scorton. That is a matchup of potentially 2 top 10 picks. And I think it's going to be an absolute battle. And I just want to see this Texas offensive line against this A&M defensive line. I think Texas can have success with the outside zone running scheme that they've had a lot of success with how A&M likes to stunt, with how they like to slant. I've watched too many A&M games this week. I'm going to vomit from it. I think there is room to be had in the running game, which I originally didn't really think, but after watching multiple games of A&M, they do struggle at times with that outside zone. Their edges are prone to getting washed underneath on those. And I think Texas, that's an area where they can take advantage of. And that's what I'm going to be looking for. Because I think early down rush success is going to be a huge metric of if this offense is going to have a very good game or if this is going to look like in Arkansas.
Yeah, I think this game's going to be a little sloppy. And I don't know about sloppy in terms of turnovers. I just don't think we're going to just see big play after big play and there just be a ton of offense. I think it's going to be kind of defensive centric to start the game off. I wouldn't be surprised, Jake, the halftime score is like 10-7 or something. I wouldn't be surprised at all if it's close, low scoring, which is where Texas A&M wants Texas to be. They do not want Texas to get off to a fast start like Auburn did going up 21-0 in the first quarter. They cannot afford to do that against a Texas team from that defense that we saw from Texas A&M. Now, Texas A&M was able to flip the switch in the second half, and they allowed, I think, only 6 or some odd points in that second half, not counting overtime, but in that second half to Auburn and made their comeback. But I do see this being kind of a knockout, drag out, maybe frustrating game for the offense to start things off. However, with that being said, I think that this team is going to win the way that they've always won, Jake, and that's from the defense. and it's going to be a solid performance from the defense, and it's going to be getting Marcel Reed in long distance situations on second and third down, like you said, winning that first down battle. I think that's really what is going to happen for Texas to have success, and containing Marcel Reed is not something that they haven't shown that they can't do this season. It's not like an Achilles heel where LSU has a glaring gap of mobile quarterbacks. They can't control them. And that's not something we've seen from Texas. We haven't seen many weaknesses from the Texas defense. And so I'm just really excited to see how they're going to come out and come play. I think Anthony Hill and Colin Simmons are going to have huge games. I think Anthony Hill is going to be vital in this team's success. And if he is on his A game, which he should be, he got snubbed from the Butkus Award. He's been called out by Texas A&M offensive linemen. He was committed to Texas A&M, flipped from Texas A&M to Texas, and is now playing in this game this year. This dude has a lot to play for, and he is excited to get out there. I think Anthony Hill is going to have a huge game this game. I'm talking double-digit tackles, multiple sacks, maybe a turnover here or there. He's going to be all over the place.
Yeah, the more I looked at this game, the more I feel like Texas should win, but it is a rivalry. It is on the road. As we've seen in the SEC this year, playing on the road has been very tough for just about everyone. Yes, Texas has been very successful on the road. They have not had a road game like this.
Nope.
I mean, Michigan would probably be, Arkansas would probably be the closest. I'd probably say Arkansas is better than Michigan. And I mean, A&M beat Arkansas. So there you go. And that's A&M wasn't even playing that good of football then.
Yeah.
And so, but where I think Texas wins this game is if this Texas defense has showed any weakness, it has been on occasion struggling with inside zone running schemes by power running backs. That is not what A&M runs with their current running backs. They look to go on the edge. They look to do more of a power scheme. They're not going inside zone type running plays. And I don't think they're going to have enough success running the ball. I'm sure Marcel Reed will have some plays. I do think they're going to score some points. But I think Texas wins this game 31-23. And I think it's going to be on the back of a defensive touchdown. That's finally going to happen. They haven't had one all year, which is almost hard to believe with how good.
Had one with Ethan Burke against UTSA to close that game out.
Yeah. So they really haven't had one that's been a difference maker all year. I don't even think we were watching at that point. We were watching while recording.
We were recording at that point. Yeah, no, I actually remember.
And so I that's how I think Texas is going to win this game. I think it's going to be ugly. Twitter is going to be the most toxic place on the planet for
I might delete the app until afterwards.
Yeah, I think I got to stay off of it for this game because the irrational reactions are going to be at an all-time high from everyone, and I want to stop myself from doing it as well.
And it's going to be from both sides. Both sides of the aisle are going to be obnoxious and just awful to listen to. And so I really want to stay off the app until after. I do want to jump on afterwards, win or lose. I'm going to jump on afterwards. But anyway, Jake, I'm going to go ahead. Give my prediction, 26-24 Texas wins. Final second field goal to win the game by Bert Auburn, 35-yarder, and he gets carried off the field, Justin Tucker style. We repeat history to start this thing renewed back up the way we ended it 13 years ago.
Man, it better be a 35-yarder. I have no trust in Bert Auburn this year.
He's been sketchy. He has been sketchy.
He's missed every kick he's missed has been at a point in the game where Texas needed that make.
Well, not only that, but his misses are as soon as it comes off his foot. It's like it's not even that they're hanging, left or they're hooking at late. No, it is the moment it comes off the guy's foot. It's a miss.
I think
and now whenever
14 on the season.
Now when he makes it, it looks good from the get-go. So it's either it's literally hit or miss for Bert Auburn. So
down the middle or shanked.
Now, Jake, Texas is 5.5-point favorites. You would have them covering in that scenario. I would not have them. I would have Texas A&M covering. But I think it's going to be a close game. I think it's going to be ugly. I think A&M. This game, Jake, does this game make you nervous? Does it?
Definitely. Texas. At the start of the week, I had A&M winning. That was going to be, if we recorded this on Monday, I would have had A&M winning this game by a couple points. Just through watching the games, I feel like Texas has an edge here, but in my prediction, my route to victory for Texas, it could just not happen. They could not have success running the ball. A&M could have success running the ball. Texas struggles for the first time containing a running QB. I think Marcel Reed's probably the best thrower that they've gone against that is also a runner. Not the best overall thrower, but probably the best that has that dual threat. I mean, maybe Green for Arkansas would be ahead of them.
That's kind of where I was going.
They're probably pretty similar at the end of the day. So I'm definitely nervous about this game. A&M's a good football team. They have everything to lose in this game. They were probably preparing for this game last week, as Mike Elko said.
Yeah, and Texas doesn't have a whole lot to lose.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, if I was going to put a percentage of how confident I am at Texas winning this, I'd say their chances to win are probably like 52 to 55%. I mean, it's near a coin flip game, in my opinion.
I completely agree with you. And I've had this kind of butterfly knot feeling in my gut all week long leading up to this game. And I don't know if that's good. I don't know if that's bad. Sometimes whenever I don't feel nervous, Texas plays worse than whenever I'm just like OU going into the OU game. I was just like, oh my gosh, dude, I just don't know. They're not playing good, but it's Texas OU. And, and then Texas comes out and curb stomps them. I actually felt more confident going into the Georgia game than I probably should have, and they didn't play well. So I don't know whether or not my butterflies and knots are a good thing or a bad thing, but I do have this just kind of just feeling in my gut of like, man, this is going to be a close game. This is not just going to be Texas. This isn't going to be Texas Tech last year to end the season off, in my opinion.
No, if it was in Austin, I would feel more confident in a Texas win. I think home field for this type of game, just especially with how this season has gone, it just feels like home field is typically bookmakers will say it's like a 2 to 3 point swing. It feels like this year it's like a touchdown swing type deal. And especially in a game like this, they're going to set their attendance record. It is the most expensive ticket in the history of college or pro football for a regular season game. It's going to be an unreal environment, and it's going to be tough for I mean, they're not going to be able to hear anything. No. And so this game scares me. I think if this game doesn't scare you as a Texas fan, I think you're setting unrealistic expectations, and you're probably going to be pissed off midway through the first quarter when Texas isn't up 14-0.
Agreed. All right. Well, that's going to close that chapter, Jake. Texas A&M. That's it. All done. Hands clean of it. There's nothing else you and I can talk about. There's nothing else you and I can say or do that's going to change what's going to happen come Saturday. So let's go ahead, move on. Oregon State at number 11, Boise State. Now, Oregon have won the regular season of the Pac-12 against Washington State a week ago, won that game, and really kind of tarnished any type of possibility Washington State may or may not have had of getting into the playoffs. But Boise State going into that game at home as 19-point favorites.
Yeah, and that was a big win for Oregon State. It feels like this is just prime to be the letdown spot. Boise State knows they're playing for their playoff lives. I do think that is a lot of points in this game. And so I'm going to take Oregon State to cover, but I think Boise State wins.
I think Oregon State covers, and I think it's going to be less than a touchdown win for Boise State. But I do think Boise State hangs on for another week of survival. They've had closer games than they would have liked here in the later stretch in November and late October. So I think Oregon State is going to give it to them. Do not be surprised if Oregon State wins this thing and completely just turns these college football playoffs on its head with what the G5 looks like. So, but I do think Boise State wins this game, but in a close one. Georgia Tech at number 7, Georgia, 19.5-point favorites, also seeming pretty steep. This is a pretty, not a huge rivalry, but when it comes to non-conference rivalries, this is a pretty good one.
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason it's always played on rivalry week because it is, I mean, they're in-state rivals. It's probably even a little more lopsided than Texas A&M. If this game was at Georgia Tech, I would feel tempted to say they really had a shot at possibly winning, but I think I've said how big I think home field advantage is when Georgia Tech has played some of these top teams other than Miami. Louisville, Notre Dame, they have lost them fairly handedly. So I like Georgia in this game. I think I'm going to take Georgia Tech to cover. I think that's a lot of points. I think maybe it'll be right at the line. They'll lose by 19. The game will be in hand. You'll know Georgia's going to win it most of the game. But maybe Georgia Tech has a good first half to keep it close, and they kind of cover the spread just off of a quarter or two of good football.
On a scale of 1 to 10 in terms of upset worriness that I have for Georgia in this one, I would probably put it at around a 3. And that's just a sheer respect out of it being a somewhat of a rivalry game. And so I'll say Georgia Tech covers. I do think it'll be a 2-touchdown game, though. I think Georgia wins it fairly comfortably, somewhere along the range of like a 32-16, 32-14-ish, frame where Georgia's not really stressed by the end of it. All right. The big one, Jake, this is going to be a noon kickoff as it always is, but it will be Michigan at Ohio State, the only game, in my opinion, that can even sniff Texas, Oklahoma. It is a 21-point spread in favor of Ohio State at home. Does Michigan have what it takes to win? What is it? What would it be? 3 straight or 4 straight?
I think 4. I believe
straight?
4.
4 straight. Yeah, Ryan Day has had a little bit of a hiccup against Michigan of recent. And so Michigan, obviously not the team that they've been the last 3 years.
Yeah, and the answer is no. This is going to be a bludgeoning. Ohio State is going to let out 3 years of frustration into this game. I think Ryan Day will make it a point to try to run up the score. I think the players will make it a point to try to run up the score. I don't think backups are going to come in. There will be no mercy showed in this game, and they're going to win. I think they're going to win by 35 plus in this game.
We saw a little bit of that from Will Howard last week with Coach Kirk Cignetti putting out a cigarette on the sideline. I don't know if you saw that, but we saw a little bit of fire lit under Ohio State from last week's game with people doubting them against Indiana. For this to be Michigan, yeah, it could get pretty ugly.
56-10 is going to be my final prediction.
I'm not going to go that crazy, but it is. I'll say like 40 to 10 or 13. I mean, I don't think it's going to be much better. So, all right. We both think Ohio State's going to steamroll Michigan in that one. Let's go ahead and move down. Number 7, Tennessee, 10.5-point favorites at Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt, a much better home team this year than they are on the road. Jake, what's your feeling on this one?
I wish this game was a couple weeks ago. Vanderbilt's just kind of been on a slide. They played South Carolina at home. They lost 28-7. They lost a close one at LSU 24-17, but LSU sucks, as we have learned.
Yep, they do.
And I just don't see, they won at Auburn 17-7. That's a pretty good win. Obviously, they had the 3-point loss to Texas, but it's just hard for me to see Vanderbilt being able to move the ball when their offensive line is more than likely going to just get ran over by this Tennessee front. I think Tennessee covers, but it'll be one of those like 13, 16-point just comfortable wins where Vanderbilt never threatens. It'll be like 24-7 or something along those lines, where I don't think Tennessee's offense is that great, but they'll be able to put up points against this defense. And then on the flip side, I have a hard time seeing Vanderbilt actually being able to do much against this defense.
I think Vanderbilt lost the element of surprise after they beat Bama and they played Texas very well. And they've beaten some teams throughout this season that maybe snuck up on opponents. I don't think they have that sneaky ability for teams not to play up to their best game against them anymore. I don't think that they have that advantage. I also think teams are kind of starting to figure them out. They're starting to figure out the Pavia. His numbers have been awful the last few weeks. And so I'm with you. Again, I will say this much. Don't be surprised if Vanderbilt does win this game. I'll give them the same boost of confidence that I gave Oregon State against Boise State. I just don't think it's going to happen. I will say Vanderbilt's going to cover with a 10-point loss to Tennessee. I think it's going to be somewhere along the lines of maybe like a 27-17, 24-14-ish range. But I do think it'll be a 10-point win for Tennessee, and Tennessee punches their ticket into the playoffs. So last game, Jake, or not last game, I beg your pardon, but this game is a big one. Number 15, South Carolina at number 12, Clemson. Clemson 2.5-point favorites at home. You have a pretty distinct outlook on this game in terms of ranking opponents into the by the College Football Committee.
Yeah, I think this is a great game for the committee to use to really get a gauge of how different are these conferences from the standpoint of, I know the ACC might not be as deep as the SEC or Big Ten, but is a 3-loss SEC team truly better than a 2-loss team from the ACC or the Big Ten? And I think this is a good game to gauge it. If it's a really close game either way, you can say maybe there's not that big of a difference. If South Carolina just goes in and wins by multiple scores, then yeah, you can probably be like, there might be a pretty big disparity between these conferences, and not necessarily use it as the blueprint for how you rank. But if South Carolina goes in and just loses to Clemson or barely wins the game, I think that should affect in Alabama, honestly. I mean, it should affect some of these 3-loss teams to where a 2-loss Clemson or 2-loss SMU or 2-loss Miami is definitely going to get in over them, because right now with how they ranked Alabama this week, as we talked about earlier in the week, it seems like they're trying to find a way to put them in. And I think this is a game you can at least use as a small gauge to kind of see if that affirms your belief or maybe makes you doubt it a little bit more from the committee perspective.
And you're talking about maybe the fifth team standings wise in the SEC, going up against a team that could possibly play their way into the ACC championship game as a top 2 team in the conference. Now, but that's what I'm saying, Jake, is I think you're right, where these two teams are actually on pretty level playing fields, because I do think South Carolina, they're a game or two. They are really 2 games away from being a 2-loss team this year and beating an LSU, beating an Alabama. I think they lost both those games combined by what was it?
And they were jobbed in the LSU game by the officials.
Correct. And so I think they lost both
they've
of those
just been
games by a
playing
combined
really good
4
football
points.
as of late. I think almost everyone is saying, with how South Carolina has played as of late, they've played like a top 3 or 4 team in the conference.
Yeah, no, I agree. And so, Jake, what did you give a final prediction on that?
I do think South Carolina is going to win this game. I think they're going to win this game by 2 or 3 possessions. I think that highly of South Carolina, and I just haven't been able to talk myself into truly believing in Clemson the entire year. So I'm going to stick with my gut.
I like that, Jake. I really do. I think South Carolina wins this game. I don't know if I can go out and say 2 or 3 possessions, because it is at Clemson, and it is an important game for these two teams. I mean, they play on rivalry week for a reason. Clemson is going to be playing for their playoff lives. They're going to be playing to win an ACC championship game. They've got much more on the line than I think a South Carolina does. Not to say that South Carolina has a 0% chance of making the college football playoffs, because they still do have a percentage to get in. But I do think Clemson has more to play for. I do think South Carolina is the better team. I'm going to go ahead and say South Carolina wins this one by 4 or 5 points. All right, Jake. Next game up, number 5, Notre Dame, 7.5-point favorites at USC.
And this is, let me find it. This is my upset. This is the game that's really going to shake up things, because then the committee, they're going to have a decision to make on if they do want to drop them out of the rankings. So I think USC, they've been playing a little bit better as of late, kind of. But I think Notre Dame is beatable. I think USC is the style of team that's going to do it, where they're not just going to try to power run it on Notre Dame. That just doesn't work for teams, as we've seen with Army and Navy getting just bashed by them. I think USC is going to be able to score some points on this defense through the air. And then on the flip side, USC's defense has been much better. Notre Dame's offense is not world beaters. I think Notre Dame will have success on offense, but I think USC just wins this game something around 33-28, 33-30, something around that score, where they get in the low 30s, and Notre Dame's offense is just not good enough to match it.
Jake, I was going to have you sound the alarm on this game. We do not talk about these.
Double alarm.
We do not talk about these before. We just say, hey, do you have an upset? Yep, I got an upset. Yep, so do I. We agree on this game. I think USC is going to come out and win this game. I was going to, if we weren't going to be allowed, and you can overrule me on if you want me to steal the thunder of picking this as as my upset game, because I can pick another game if you want me to. I can switch my Oregon State pick.
We don't plan it beforehand. I think if it just works out, I mean, this is one of the rare times this season we've had it happen. I think it's fair game because for people listening in, we truly do not coordinate this before. We just go, do you have an upset?
Yep. You have an upset? Yep. I got one in mind. Yep. So do I. And for those who have listened to previous podcasts, I don't think not one time this entire year we picked the same game. So, but yeah, I think I like USC in this game. I think Notre Dame is in a really tough spot going into this one. Like you said, USC is playing much better. They're playing for their bowl lives. And Notre Dame, I know they're still playing for their college football playoff lives. I don't know. I think Lincoln Riley's going to have something to show the country in this game as a kind of a last hurrah, a remember me by, whether it comes to recruiting or even going into next year's rankings.
Yeah, and they have won their last two games against Nebraska and then the rivalry game at UCLA. The Nebraska win's not a bad one. Nebraska's not that good, but they're not a bad team either.
They're bowl eligible for they broke the longest streak of a Power 4 conference team not making a bowl. Nebraska's in a bowl this year. So they are better than they have been over the last 13, 14, 15 years, however long it's been.
Yeah, and deservingly so. They are a bowl worthy team this year with a freshman quarterback at that. But yeah, this win, maybe it's because I want it to happen too. Because I don't want we're already getting Penn State. To me, Penn State, Notre Dame are one and the same. I want one of them to drop out, and it's not going to be Penn State.
Now, Jake, if one of these teams drop out, what's your fear level on Alabama sneaking in?
Like a 9 out of 10, 9.5 out of 10.
Yeah, same.
And it's not a fear level of, they'd be a scary team. It's they don't deserve it. They have been inconsistent all year. They had a stretch of a couple games where they looked like it, and they had the first half against Georgia. They have lived off of that. They looked bad against USF earlier in the year. Obviously they lost to Vanderbilt. They got throttled by Oklahoma. They made Jackson Arnold look like Tim Tebow in that game. And I just don't think they have any business being in based off how they've played and based off the fact they have 3 losses.
No, but I do agree with you. Not scary as in like, oh boy, they're going to come in and run the table. More like just annoyed the fact that they would even have
getting in off of their name.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, Jake, last game that we're going to talk about, number 24, Kansas State at number 18, Iowa State. This game has implications, as does almost every game in the Big 12 this weekend, have implications on the Big 12 championship game this year. Now, what are the odds on favorite? I believe Arizona State taking on Iowa State are the 2 likeliest of scenarios for it to be the Big 12 championship game. Iowa State wins, they're in. Arizona State wins, they're in.
Yeah, from my understanding, that is the case. If we're wrong, we might be wrong.
Sorry.
The Big 12 is such a crapshoot right now, but I believe that is the case. That is at least what I have heard, but it doesn't seem like anyone is 100% confident in their answers when they say this, which is wild when we're going into the final week. Yeah. This game to me is all about home field advantage. K-State has not been a very good road team this year. Iowa State, typically, I know they did lose to Tech at home. I think the KU game might have been in Ames as well. But Kansas State has struggled on the road this year. I think Iowa State kind of righted the ship, and I think they get a big win. It'll be a close game, maybe a field goal, so they cover. It's a 2.5 point spread at the end of the day. But I do think this is a close game, probably low scoring, probably ugly. And I think K-State just makes 1 or 2 too many turnovers, and that costs them the game.
Give me the chaos. I'm taking Kansas State in this one. I want pure chaos. As much as I'm rooting for Arizona State because I like their story, they were projected to be the last place team to finish in the Big 12, and I want them to win it. I would be okay if they lost. on Saturday. Just give me chaos in the Big 12. I want the Big 12 to just implode on themselves in terms of going to the playoffs this year.
Baylor
So
TCU
yeah,
is the nightmare matchup for the Big 12.
Yeah, like a West Virginia Baylor or something just off the wall, insane, something no one's talked about. So, but yeah, give me K-State in this game. I think they win it, and I'll say they win it by 8-9 points, something along that range. So, all right, Jake, that's going to do it for our final predictions episode. Texas A&M. We both have Texas winning. I have it by a final second field goal by Bert Auburn, getting carried off the field, both horns up, just like we saw 13 years ago with Justin Tucker. You've got a more comfortable win for Texas, but not just final score wise, not necessarily throughout the entire.
It's a one possession win at the end of the day. And like I said, my confidence meter, it would be at about 55%, probably towards Texas. So I think we're both giving adequate respect to Texas A&M as a football, as much as we've clowned them all year, and especially me, I'm very guilty of it. That tells you what I do think of Mike Elko and what I do think what he's done with this program in year one. This is the first time in my lifetime where I look at them and I go, I think they're a legit football program for the first time in my lifetime.
Would anything surprise you?
An A&M blowing out Texas would surprise me. We haven't seen. I know everyone says it was the Georgia game, but it still was a one possession game going into the fourth. Maybe A&M could jump out to a big lead, but I just find it hard to believe that Texas would lose this game by 3 possessions or anything more than 10 points. Really, would really surprise me.
Yeah. What about Texas blowing out A&M? I mean, I can kind of see it. I can see that
because
being.
Texas has a ceiling that we have not seen at too many times this year. We've seen flashes of it. If they put that together for 4 quarters, all of a sudden, I think they can blow out every single team in the country, minus maybe Oregon, Ohio State.
Yeah. All right, Jake, that's going to do it for our episode. I'm Tanner Carlson. That's Jake Jimerson. This is your daily fix for all things Texas Longhorns on Rogue Sports Network. Again, we drop these episodes Tuesday through Friday at noon, and then on Saturdays, we let the football dictate our show, and we give you an immediate reaction following the Texas Longhorn game, and we will have that for you. Win or lose, we will be here on Saturday following the Texas A&M game. So like, share, subscribe, put your alerts on, and follow us every step of the way. We'll be there for you. Again, as always, hook 'em.
All in Sports Network. We love sports.